Hi everyone, thank you for joining us today and watching our ASDA District 8 Lobby Day Bootcamp to prep for our 2025 Lobby Day in Washington, D.C. And hopefully you can use this for any other kind of Lobby Day prep that you may need. Let's get it on with, if that even makes sense. I want to start off by asking, what is a dental advocate? A dental advocate is an individual or a group that works to influence the decision makers who regulate the profession of dentistry. This can include our state legislator, our state dental associations and boards, different boards and departments like the Department of Human Health and Human Services, Medicaid programs, and other regulatory agencies across our District 8 states and nationally. And so when thinking of different ways of how we can be an advocate, not only as a dental student, but just as a person in general, as a whole, I came up with a few, I'd say obvious, but maybe not obvious to others, obvious to me, examples of how we can practice being an advocate today. So obviously the first example is by practicing in any traditional lobbying events or days, like national or lobby state days, is a great way to practice advocacy in action. While you're at these lobby days, talking to a legislator, connecting with them, and asking them for specific action on a specific piece of legislation, or asking them for a specific result, whether that be by email, letter, phone call, or in person, these are all amazing ways that you can take initiative in becoming an awesome advocate. Different grassroots initiatives, like local initiatives, like supporting local political profits or PAC groups or any local protests or anything like that, are a great way as well to practice advocacy. And this bullet point I think is interesting. I think that speaking to patients about pertinent topics is a great way to be an advocate, but we want to make sure that we are being respectful and mindful of the patient's barriers, boundaries, cultural values. We don't want to make it seem like we're pushing politics down their throats, but if they do start asking things about fluoride, it's obviously in our best interest to treat our patients to the utmost level of care, with the utmost level of care that they deserve. So we want to make sure that we are presenting them with the facts, right? And then obviously in today's day and age, social media campaigns can go a long way when you are wanting to advocate. So ASDA Advocacy specifically has some great resources that I just kind of wanted to plug with you guys really quick. First link you could find is the ASDA Advocacy Hub. So this goes to the ASDA Action Center, which is a great homepage for a lot of different resources that we can use in bettering our advocacy skills as a dental student. If you go to congress.gov, you'll be able to locate your representatives and read more about them and what they stand for, which I highly recommend before attending Lobby Day. If you want to learn about more state-specific issues, you would click this link to the ADA State Advocacy page. And I have linked ASDA Advocacy Council's Lobby Day prep video from their webinar from last week, which is awesome, and it had a lot of great information about Congress, how to speak to Congress, kind of like what Congress is, how does Congress work, and a lot of just great tips about lobbying in general. So this is copied from the last email that we got from, I believe her name is Sarah from the ADA, who is updating attendees every Tuesday about different Lobby Day things. The first thing she wanted to point out is that since much of Congress is new, we will have to reintroduce ourselves. Like, why are we here, right? Why is dentistry important? Why are we advocating for dentistry? Who is ASDA? What is ADA? What do we stand for, etc.? We want to make sure that we are focusing on issues that affect students and new dentists, right? So the most pertinent example for that would be lower payment and debt relief. Some issues that kind of are heavy hitters on dentists are insurance and repayment reform issues. And then when we're thinking about how issues affect our communities and our patients and access to care and all that, we really want to make sure that we are lobbying for Medicaid and other public programs. We can get more into that in a second. If you have not noticed, things in the federal government, especially lately, are always changing. So I trust that the ADA will keep us informed of any changes that we may need to know about in the next coming weeks. So when we look at what is specifically affecting dental students, like first and foremost, we want to make sure that we are advocating for Medicaid and Medicare reform. We want to make sure not only are we advocating for fair reimbursement rates and expanding dental coverage amongst the country, but we want to make sure that we are also advocating for keeping Medicaid and Medicare and all that as a whole, because recently those have been rumored to be on the federal funding chopping block, and we can't really advocate for better or fair reimbursement rates if these programs such as Medicaid don't even exist in the first place, right? So we want to make sure that we have that in mind. We want to make sure that we are advocating for dental insurance transparency, because even though we are not practicing now, in the real world we don't have a real practices yet. We may think that insurance may not really affect us yet, but it will very quickly. And we want to make sure that we are supporting any necessary acts. When looking at student loan reform, obviously this is another hot topic federally, unfortunately, but we want to make sure that we are still advocating for that expanded public service loan forgiveness. Lastly, we want to make sure that we are thinking about workforce shortages at our time in DC. We want to make sure that we're addressing that the very real dental provider shortages in rural and underserved communities, honestly, throughout our country as a whole, through funding and incentive programs. I'm not going to go into this too much, but this is a slide that I had in our Iowa Lobby Day presentation that I wanted to keep in. Obviously, this is from a few months ago, back in January, when the Trump administration issued a directive to pause all federal grants and loans, and Medicaid funding fell under this umbrella. And so, like I said, things are always changing. So the last that I've heard about all this is that, and don't quote me exactly, but I believe that almost the entirety of the Medicaid budget, around $800 trillion, is on the chopping block currently with the federal government. This is just really important to be aware of, because personally I think that we can't ask for small solutions to things such as better Medicaid reimbursements, like I said, when things like Medicaid, Medicare, Social Security, these social nets that really help the people of the United States are just not even in place anymore, and that can actually kind of be detrimental to our lobbying motivation, but personally I think that fighting for the greater good is always going to be the long fight, but is a good fight, and hopefully that's why we're all here for the same reason, right? So yeah, let's bring that energy to DC. So a quick lobby day breakdown. So on Sunday, March 30th, I believe that optional training sessions will be held that day. I'm not sure if that's what the breakout sessions will consist of this optional training, but as you can see later on in the schedule from 3 to 5:15, there are 2 different breakout sessions. We will officially begin programming on Sunday, March 30th in the evening at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Time for our welcome reception. On Monday, March 31st, Lobby Day programming will begin at 8:30 a.m. Eastern Time, and we will have a few presentations just kind of about advocacy, probably more in depth on our certain issues, and just like, reminders of the political climate here in DC. From 11:15 to 12:15, we will have another presentation called How to Meet with Your Member of Congress. By 12:15, hopefully, we will be dismissed for lunch, which we will have with our state dental associations, and then we're going to use this time to discuss and strategize our meetings with Congress. Most states will have their congressional meetings on April 1st, but some states have meetings on the 31st, so be aware of that. I'm sure we will be made aware of that ahead of time. And then from 2 to 5 p.m. on the 31st, that's when we will have our meetings with Senate. On Tuesday, April 1st, from 6:30 to 8:30 Eastern Time, they will have a breakfast buffet. From 8:30 to 4, the ADA House will be open. And same thing, from 8:30 to 4, the ADA Senate property will be open. I'm not really sure what that consists of. This is my first time, not only in DC, but for our ADA, Dental Student Lobby Day, so I'm kind of excited to check that out. And then from 9:30 to 4:30 p.m., basically all day on the 1st, we will continue with our Hill meetings. So how do I lobby? Personally, I think that lobbying is a really exciting thing to be a part of, but it can easily feel overwhelming. So just some tips that I have and that I've gathered from other sources, such as the Iowa Dental Association, or asking veteran classmates who have attended lobby days. So you want to make sure that you're speaking from the heart. Again, I really emphasize the importance of specifics, just because What we say is probably the most passionate thing that a legislator will hear all day. Yeah, so remember to leave a gracious impression. I'm sure they will really appreciate it. It seems like just graciousness as a whole is much needed up there these days, so make sure to leave a wonderful impression. Stories are easier to remember than pre-scripted statements. You don't want to come sounding like a robot, right? You also want to make sure that you're standing your ground, standing up for what you believe in, right? But also remember to remain polite and respectful. And going along with that, do not fight fire with fire. Think of like your best patient de-escalation practices, as they may come in handy while speaking to these legislators, right? And don't be afraid to follow the leads of dentists or upperclassmen or the folks that are lobbying with your state dental association until you feel comfortable enough to participate. Some more tips, which include keeping your ask simple and staying focused. Going off of that, you want to make sure that you ask your legislator to support a specific position before the conversation is fully ended. And you want to make sure you come in prepared, right? That's pretty vague, but take that however you may. If that means reading up on your legislators the night before and taking some notes, if that means, quick Wikipedia searches on some of these bills that we're talking about, however you feel like you need to best prepare, make sure you do that. We want to make sure that we're using facts, right? We don't want to overwhelm people with these insane numbers and insane stats. But it's also important to remind them that we are the dental experts and that we know our stuff. Staff members are just as important as the member of Congress herself or himself. So don't feel disappointed if you're, waiting to meet with one of your hotshot legislators and then you have a staff member instead. They're equally as important to fight in the good fight, right? Just a reminder that legislators want to hear from you. They want to know what's happening to their constituents and in their districts, right? And it is within their job description to work with and for the people. So don't feel like you are inconveniencing them by being here today. Or, not today, but yeah. So just some examples on how you might word some things. For example, you want to start off with a strong introduction. You might say, "Hi, my name is Jessie Gomez, and I'm a second-year dental student at the University of Iowa, and I'm here representing ASDA or the ADA, etc." Tell your story. For example, many of my future patients won't be able to afford care because Medicaid reimbursement is so low that providers cannot afford to see them. Having family members who grew up on Medicaid, I know how much this can impact our patients. I want to serve underserved communities, but without fair reimbursement, access to care will continue to decline due to most of us medical and dental students graduating the programs with around $400K in debt. Not really sure why through in medical they're kind of an ad lib. I also would not be surprised if they ask why physicians and medical students aren't with us. Well, that's because we're totally two different fields and specialties, right, of medicine. So yeah. And lastly, you want to make sure you keep your ask, whatever you're asking of these legislators, representatives, clear and direct. And so I just want to end this presentation with a few call to actions. One, make sure that you contact your legislators and start building relationships today, whether this be in preparation for our time in DC, preparation for our next lobby day, state lobby day next year, etc. I think this could also be a great way to network and also have maybe some cool lunch and learn events and guests at school. So yeah, just never know where these relationships might take you, so that's why it's important to start building them today. Number 2, find out what your representatives stand for at www.govtrack.us. Confirm your lobby day registration and plans if you have not already. And lastly, the last call to action I am asking you all to do is to start thinking about what advocacy as a dental student or as a person in general means to you. For example, think about what drove you to be here today at DC. What drove you to speak up at your state lobby day? What is the best part for you about making a difference this way as an advocate? I may or may not be asking people sad or similar questions for a Contour article, so stay tuned for that. And with that, I wanted to say thank you to everyone who joined in on this video today, and I hope that you learned a thing or two that can better prepare you for either National Lobby Day in Washington, D.C. or your state's next Lobby Day. Thank you so much, and have a great rest of your day.